Dominican PM Roosevelt Skerrit condemns protests bringing violence into the country's election campaign. Police and military forces repress demonstrators rejecting the de facto government of Bolivia in the town of Sincata. And the Palestinian Liberation Organization condemns the U.S. move to legitimize Israeli settlements in occupied Palestine. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. Beginning with news from the Caribbean, Dominica is tense after a standoff between police and protesters on Monday night. Security forces set up barricades in Rosso as protesters called for the implementation of electoral reforms dictated by the Organization of American States at a meeting in August this year. Tear gas was also used to disperse demonstrators trying to access the street where the government headquarters and country's financial center are located. The government said that the measures, including voter ID cards, are not feasible. General elections are scheduled for December 6, 2019, and this Tuesday is nomination day for candidates. Now, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has addressed the nation to condemn the intrusion of violence into the election campaign. He said that electoral reform is not the reason behind the protests.
Today, nomination day in Dominica, it is my very sad duty to inform you of events that took place last evening from about 7:15 p.m. These events signaled the intrusion of violence into the election campaign in a manner that is unfamiliar, unnecessary, and unproductive. Ladies and gentlemen, in 18 days, a general election will be held in Dominica, at which time supporters of the UWP can make their opinions clear in the ballot box. Surely, then, election reform cannot therefore be the real reason for these protests.
PM Skerrit also assured that the upcoming election will be governed by the same process as all elections in Dominica since the island achieved independence. He highlighted the fact that the opposition United Workers' Party had increased their vote share under the system in the last election.
The elections on December 6 are being held under the same electoral laws which have governed Dominica's free and fair elections and democratic process since our attainment of independence. Both the current Labour government and the UWP opposition have been elected through this exact process and under the same laws and conditions. It is this same process and those same laws that saw the United Workers' Party increase its seat count in the last general elections in Dominica, and also its share of the popular vote. It is with this same process and these same laws that the United Workers' Party and its supporters are forecasting a massive win for the opposition on December 6. So one must ask, what really is the reason and the cause for this gangster-like action? Why are they seeking to tarnish and destroy the image and economic well-being of the country they are confident of receiving the mandate to lead in 18 days? Something about their behavior does not add up.
In other news, Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has once again defended state of emergencies implemented across 7 of 19 police divisions. Addressing party supporters on Monday, Holness said the SOEs are intended to reduce violent crime.
It is not something that I want to do because we have the power to do it. That's not the case. We have to do it because for many years of neglect in our country, social and economic neglect and decay, criminals have become entrenched in our society, carrying on criminal enterprise for profit. But not only that, in some instances, crime has become a culture. Violence has become a culture. We have an epidemic of violence and crime. And so we have to take exceptional measures to address this epidemic.
At least 4 people were shot during protests in Haiti's capital on Monday, hours after President Jovenel Moïse rejected calls to resign. Hundreds marched from the Delmas to Pétionville neighborhoods when shots were fired from nearby. It has been reported that among the injured were 2 protesters, a police officer and a journalist.
We should sit and talk with everyone who truly wants change, and we can come to a good political agreement. We will put together a united national government with new objectives that will take great effort to eliminate corruption in the country.
In Venezuela, the national dialogue promoted by President Nicolas Maduro continues to advance towards a political agreement in the country. The Venezuelan president held a meeting on Monday with political leaders taking part in the National Dialogue Table to evaluate their progress. The meeting took place at Miraflores Palace. The current negotiations focus on the conditions to choose a new head for the National Electoral Council and the parliamentary elections scheduled for the year 2020. Speaking after the meeting, opposition representative Claudio Fermin praised the efforts made by the national government to renew the National Electoral Council.
Se pusieron a trabajar.
They did the work, and Venezuela, who won a new National Electoral Council, the one who won better guarantees for elections, we can tell you that a steady and firm road is being built to start naming candidates to lead the National Electoral Council.
Meanwhile, the head of the government delegation and communications minister Jorge Rodriguez announced that several proposals from the opposition regarding economic and social matters have already been taken into consideration by President Nicolas Maduro.
Some proposals coming from the opposition at the National Dialogue Table were quickly accepted by the constitutional president Nicolás Maduro Moros. One such proposal was extension of taxes to a large number of items that are imported and that will allow the population access to more goods, services and medicine at a lower price. There is a need to make procedures more agile for the mechanism of exporting and importing goods.
Still to come, Uruguay is counting down until a runoff presidential election. We investigate after the break.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the new source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. In Latin America, demonstrations calling for the resignation of the de facto government in Bolivia and justice for those killed in repression of protests are continuing. Police acting on behalf of the current administration, led by Senator Janine Áñez, are using tear gas against indigenous, campesino and union members blocking access to and from a gas plant in the town of Sincata. Massive mobilizations took place across the country on Monday in rejection of the right-wing coup d'etat deposing President Evo Morales, with a reported increase in repression. So far, at least 24 people have been killed. And La Paz's Plaza Murillo has been fully militarized, with some reports from Bolivia suggesting that the de facto government plans to announce elections by passing the legislature. The square is the focal point of political administration in Bolivia. From Mexico, President Evo Morales tweeted to say that the Plaza Murillo is surrounded by armored vehicles in the old style of military dictatorships. He said that the coup government of Mesa, Camacho and Áñez is planning to shut down the Legislative Assembly.
They can impose elections on us through force, as they've been doing with the police and the armed forces in the streets. But what they cannot do is suppress the voice of half the population. The only way to bring peace is to listen to the other half. This has to be the dialogue. It's moving forward through international mediation. But what they cannot do is continue lying to the people, saying that mass supporters are creating conflict. They have to listen to the other half of the population who want peace, but with justice, who want peace and do not want more deaths. What we saw last night with the gassing of the elderly who were completely unarmed, how is this possible? How have we arrived at this level of hostility from the current administration? We're calling for peace and dialogue in which all parties feel represented. It will be the way out.
Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, has more from La Paz.
Here in Bolivia, all eyes are on the Plaza Murillo, where the Legislative Assembly is located, where lawmakers from the movement towards socialism, or MAS, the party of Evo Morales, have called for a session of the Congress in the late afternoon or evening. This is to study the call for new elections and the makeup of the electoral courts. These are the two steps that need to be taken almost simultaneously to begin the process of holding new elections. So far, there have been no new talks between the 70% majority held by the MAS and the minority, which holds 30% of the seats in the Assembly. At the same time, talks are continuing with the United Nations envoy, Jean Arnaud, who since Saturday has been meeting representatives of the distinct political and social forces. We have learned that the various social movements that have been marching and protesting against the coup are also taking part in those talks. New marches are already beginning from El Alto to La Paz to demand the resignation of the de facto president and her cabinet.
That was our correspondent Freddy Morales with that report. Shifting gears now, the Chilean police special task force known as Carabineros violently repressed a peaceful rally in Plaza Italia, where people have been gathering against the neoliberal system for 1 month. Repression against smaller protests on Monday saw gunshots fired by police, who also used water cannons and tear gas to disperse citizens. Despite the continued violent response by authorities, more protests are scheduled as citizens say they will not stop until a constituent assembly is formed to draft a new constitution. A runoff election is scheduled for Sunday in Uruguay between Daniel Martinez and Luis Lacalle Pou. Let's take a closer look.
Both the ruling party and the opposition spent the last weekend before the runoff vote campaigning across the country. The left-wing broad front party candidates, Daniel Martinez and Graciela Villar, toured the departments of Rocha and Tacuarembó. Here, Martinez reiterated his idea that the opposition does not offer certainties and that he is concerned of the policies they may apply.
What scares us is certain policies, because obviously there is a different vision, in our opinion, a dogmatic neoliberal vision, that they have every right to have. But that has been disastrous for Uruguay and disastrous for Latin America. We are not afraid of them as people. They are good people. We are afraid of their politics.
The opposition led by Luis Lacalle Pou and Beatriz Arguimón also toured the interior of the country, but with an opposite message, accusing the broad front of carrying out a campaign of fear. In the department of Soriano, Lacalle Pou reiterated the idea that Uruguay let years of economic growth go by without taking care of important sectors of the population.
Unfortunately, after many years of great stability and growth, many Uruguayans did not benefit at all. Unfortunately, after 16 years of uninterrupted economic growth, we have 190,000 Uruguayans living in illegal settlements. We have a housing deficit of almost 70,000. We have a growing unemployment, and we have many things to do.
On Sunday, November 24th, Uruguayans will decide who will be the next president of the country. According to polls, the favorite to win on Sunday is the right-wing candidate, Luis Lacalle Pou, who would have an advantage of at least 5 points over Daniel Martinez.
A judge in Brazil has issued an arrest warrant for the former president of Paraguay, Horacio Cartes. The detention order relates to the Lava Jato corruption investigation that has rocked Latin American politics. Cartes is suspected of assisting the man accused of being Brazil's biggest money launderer, Dario Miser, to evade justice. Interpol had already issued a red alert for Cartes and has 100 agents acting to comply with the judge's order. Staying in Brazil, deforestation in the country's Amazon has reached record levels, according to the National Space Research Institute. In the 12 months up to this July, almost 10,000 square kilometers of rainforest were destroyed. That was 30% more than in the previous year. INPE is the main official body monitoring deforestation in Brazil. President Jair Bolsonaro sacked the head of the institute earlier this year, saying its reports were false. Moving now to Ecuador, President Lenin Moreno says he will send a new economic reform bill to the National Assembly. That is, after the Assembly voted on Sunday to reject and shelve his economy bill, which was part of his bailout agreement with the International Monetary Fund.
With 133 members present at this plenary session, Ecuador's National Assembly decided with 70 votes to reject and shelve the government's bill on urgent economic development.
It was our responsibility to vote down this bill and rule it out permanently. If they want to send a new bill tomorrow, we will promise to work Saturdays and Sundays to work on this new and different legislation.
You cannot develop prosperity on the basis of more taxes, and even worse, when they hide them in a law supposedly to promote growth, but which destroys welfare to benefit a small minority.
Following this blow to the government's economic policy, President Lenin Moreno announced he would send a new economy bill focusing on taxes, and a separate bill dealing with reforms to the financial planning code.
In the spirit of democracy, I will include some of the good ideas that came up in the debate, and I reassert the principle that those who have most must pay most. I also repeat my commitment to debt relief for the 900 scholarship students.
Many economists say the economic situation is getting worse, and there is little perspective of improvement, with or without the new economy law.
The government should really think about replacing the cabinet. We have an economy minister who couldn't get an agreement on the budget for 2019, who tried to impose a decree that set the country alight, and who now sent a bill that hadn't been agreed with anyone. The government needs to step back or call fresh elections so there can be a real dialogue with all sectors of the country.
For many social movements, the rejection of this bill was a victory for the people of Ecuador. But the failures and hesitations afflicting the government's economic policies have sent the country's risk rating sharply upwards by 189 base points, according to JP Morgan.
Coming up, will a referendum bring peace to a region in southwest Ethiopia? More on this in just a tick.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your green zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, has strongly condemned the U.S. government's decision to stop seeing Israeli settlements of occupied Palestinian land as illegal. This as the U.S. repudiated a 1978 State Department ruling that held that the occupation of the land was inconsistent with international law. Secretary General of the PLO, Saeb Erekat, said the decision is reckless, irresponsible, and a threat to peace in the Middle East. Erekat, who is also the chief Palestinian negotiator, charged that the Donald Trump administration's latest move is a departure from international law and a setback to Middle East peace efforts.
This administration constitutes a real threat on world peace and security. And as Palestinians, we will stand tall with international law. We know we are under occupation. The statements of Secretary Pompeo is, as far as we're concerned, is null and void. It's an absolute departure of the Trump's administration from the squares of international law. And once you depart the squares of international law, you open the squares of chaos, terrorism, extremism, violence, and corruption.
On to Africa now. Less than 1 week before the much-anticipated vote to form a breakaway regional state, Ethiopia's Sidama ethnic group is hopeful the referendum will bring peace and stability. The Sidama people, Ethiopia's fifth largest ethnic group, has for decades campaigned for regional independence. They claim they are unable to enjoy their economic, social, and political rights under the current system.
The question of Sidama's statehood has been ongoing for more than 130 years. It is an issue for which our forefathers made heavy sacrifices. The referendum that will take place in about 4 days is something that makes us super excited. It's even more exciting than our wedding.
South African Airways workers will meet with Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan as the government attempts to put an end to a 5-day strike which has cost the airline $4.5 million per day. The minister will hold talks with the leadership of the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa and the South Africa Cabin Crew Association. More than 3,000 workers downed tools last week as they demand higher wages and an end to a proposed retrenchment program. The African Union Commission and the World Health Organization have signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at strengthening their relationship and cooperation. The document was signed at the WHO headquarters by the African Union Commission Chairman Musa Faki Mahamat and the Director General of the World Health Organization.
The call to action is a bold commitment by African Union countries to increase domestic investment in health and to be accountable for that commitment. The Memorandum of Understanding we have signed today is an important step towards formalizing the cooperation between WHO and the African Union and to implementing the Addis Ababa call to action.
I believe that for WHO and for Africa, it's a new page that's opening of partnership, of cooperation, for achieving a goal that's health for all.
And we end in Catalonia, where the trial of President Quim Torra is underway for alleged disobedience to a higher authority. Hundreds of citizens came out in support of the Catalonian leader as the proceedings started.
For the first time, a sitting president is judged before his tenure is over. Quim Torra, the president of Catalonia, is facing a 20-month ban on holding public office and a €30,000 penalty for disobeying the Central Electoral Court, something Torra admitted he did.
No, I did not comply with the order. In other words, I disobeyed. But it was impossible to comply with an illegal order. Everyone in this court knows that the order was illegal. It was dictated by a body that did not have the power to do so.
Outside the court, political parties and social organizations showed support for Torra.
In Catalonia's Supreme Justice Court, they judge freedom of expression. They judge fundamental rights, civil and political rights.
We are not only supporting the president, but also to say that political issues should not be resolved by using the courts. This is evading reality and the real issues that exist between Catalonia and Spain.
Minutes before entering the Supreme Court building, President Torra was accompanied by dozens of protesters who supported him.
This is proof of how Spanish courts warp and manipulate the principle of legality, and as such, they can turn any action into a crime.
Today we can see once again that the Spanish state prefers repression over dialogue and negotiation.
Back in April, the Central Electoral Court ordered Quim Torra to remove this vow from the Generalitat building, saying that during an electoral season, public institutions must show neutrality. Torra removed it, but it was apparently too late. He then placed one in support of freedom of speech. Torra's trial will be used by pro-independence parties when it comes time to swear in Pedro Sánchez. If Torra is banned from holding public office, Pere Aragonés would become interim president, and Parliament would have 2 months to find a new president. If they fail, then snap elections must be announced.
We are not contemplating the president to be banned from public office, as he himself said, so that is our working scenario.
Seeing a president of the Generalitat claiming this is terribly shameful. This is the moment to take stock of what's happening. We must gather our strength before negotiations.
Torra's sentence will be announced within a month, but if appeals are filed, the final ruling could be pushed back past next spring.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you so much for watching.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.